we are on Music and Chat with Shueh-li Ong, and we have our guest with us, Jessica Argo.
Hello.
And she's the program leader of the Bachelor of Design, Sound for the Moving Image. And she has kindly offered to guide us through a few of her favorite spots in the school at the Glasgow School of Art, and also to answer some of my questions, to talk about sound design in the industry and education even. But I just wanted to tell you a bit more about her. The little that I got of her is that she's also a cellist, and she's also an immersive installation artist. She's kindly given us an insight into, you know, her various idols, the experts that she has a fondness for their techniques, at least. So my following question, of course, is what is your favorite technique?
Maybe when it comes to teaching students, or when it comes to sound design in general, or music performance.
Oh, all right, that's good. How about...
So I wear quite a few hats.
That's right, she does. If you can't see them, they're right there. I love both, but I do love performing most of all. So how about performance?
Cool. So when it comes to performance, one of my favourites, I have to say, in recent years, I work with the Glasgow Improvisers Orchestra. I have done since I've met them in 2012, and was working with them for a year, had a wee break to do my PhD, and everything went fully back into it in 2017, been with them since then. So Glasgow Improvisers Orchestra, my role there is like I'm a committee member, so when it comes to like our funding applications and organising our festival, our yearly festival, and all our outreach and education programmes, I'm part of that. And I flip between playing cello or theremin, sometimes voice, sometimes composing for the large ensemble, improvising. But what I also do, what we've done since 2020, was we once a week play together on Zoom with our global orchestra. So it's Glasgow Improvisers Orchestra, actually has people coming up from like Huddersfield, Edinburgh, all over the UK for rehearsals and our in-person performances. But we also play using Zoom. Every week for 2 hours, people from like Vinny Golia from Los Angeles, or Constance Cooper, who's from New York but in Slovenia at the moment, Guillermo Torres in Spain, Blaise Suvala in between Mexico and Brooklyn, as well as our more local Glasgow, those in Australia and Japan as well, sometimes zooming in and composing pieces. We record every week for 2 hours, and we play almost using the camera and the virtual backgrounds as extensions of our musical background, musical performance. And sometimes, because we're sitting down at our computers in our theatre of the home, it's called, we maybe use bricolage a bit more, so that's sometimes like found objects around the house. I can tell you just a bit more about how we bring those two worlds together. So there's a place in Glasgow called the Centre for Contemporary Arts. It's a big theatre space, it's a physical theatre. There's our band with some of the ICE contemporary ensemble from New York as well, Maggie Nichols, Georgie Lewis. This is us in our physical theatre space. But sometimes we play almost like everything everywhere all at once, where we have our physical performers, we have our performers on Zoom, sometimes all in the same physical space, so that our physical audience can hear those in different parts of the world beamed over the PA, sometimes fusing together with our in-person orchestra. So, but just going back to basics, maybe some people on the channel don't know too much about musical improvisation or collaborative creativity. A lot of the world of sound design can sometimes be quite insular. You're working in a dubbing studio on your own, you're focused with your digital audio workstation, but in large group ensembles, free improvisation can sometimes doesn't quite fit into jazz, it doesn't quite fit into experimental sound design, but the principle of it is that sense of everyone bringing their instrument, and instead of having, you know, a leader of the orchestra, the lead violinist, and sections of the violins, the cellos, the brass, we sit in a circle. And with improvisation, you're listening, you're deep listening and then responding, almost like a musical conversation. Sometimes you're doing it with your eyes closed, you're just focusing on the sound. Other times you're actually reading the body language, trying to anticipate what the members of the orchestra might be doing. Sometimes when we say techniques, we're not actually just going straight from the top of our head. Sometimes we might have, you know, a graphic score. So you might be given cards distributed amongst the orchestra, where if you're given this one, you're allowed to offer an idea, a musical idea. Or if you're given this one, you're allowed to respond to someone else's idea. This is actually an interpretation of Una McGlone's Another Prism piece, where she wanted to encourage voices that maybe hadn't been as prominent in the orchestra, maybe due to their acoustic limitations. You know, cello can be quieter than saxophone. But you might not know this piece was actually composed by 5-year-olds. This is a children's composed piece.
Nice.
So yeah, some of my favourite techniques can even just be being in that dedicated space with all of these players with different musical histories. Maybe when Raymond MacDonald, the saxophonist, plays alongside myself playing the theremin, he might play his saxophone in a different way than if he was with Günter Baby Sommer's Brotherhood of Breath in Germany playing for a jazz festival, for example. So yeah, sometimes we collaborate with musicians like Surbi Mittal in India, who hand painted this graphic score for us to try and play with what's called like an omniscient sense of time rather than a linear sense of time, because she was really inspired by making synthesizer music on the river Yamuna in Delhi. And this is her painting to try and distribute the voices of electronics playing the blue in the background. If I remember right, voices could play the gold. Certainly there wasn't a part for the trumpets, there wasn't a part for the saxophones. It was a piece that was specifically prioritising underrepresented voices in the group, and encouraged the orchestra to ask questions like, oh, so are we playing it from left to right? Like we might do for a Western staff notation. And Surbi said, just you can play it with an omniscient sense of time.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't considered putting it that way. Not follow the pace of life.
She was really stunned by that sense of the river Yamuna, you know, having obviously the more than human entities. So the algae, the fish, the birds, but then when it comes to the human entities involved around the river, there would be the people who travelled by boat, the people who built their house near the river, the fact that the river was this like focal activity point for the more than human animal plant entities and the human entities, and how obviously the river's movement meant that at once it was this ancient river, but also this river that is constantly changing, and some of it's even dying because of the pollution. And so she wanted to make a piece that overall sounded very ethereal, it sounded very ghostly, it sounded very slow. And some of the members of the group, Una McGlone, Maria Sappho, Surbi, and we've been analysing the way that our orchestra members sort of changed their communication style before playing it and after playing it. So after playing it, it actually seemed to trigger this kind of these anecdotes, these personal anecdotes, the shading of like, oh, my body did this, and a bit more maybe deep listening.
So speaking of your Zoom performances, this is about telematic music making.
Yeah.
and I noticed it's quite popular amongst institutions of higher learning. And for those who are not familiar with that, it's basically kind of engages performers from remote locations and live performance via telecommunications and IT. Most often they perform remotely with their images displayed on a large kind of format screen. That's how I've seen them so far. Why do you think this collaboration minus physical proximity has become so popular? And do you think, latency and other internet issues aside, do you think it might become as popular as performing in the metaverse?
Well, for us, it was a lifeline during COVID pandemic because we were used to being in the physical space together once a month, and the concept of this infinite dislocation from our community was profoundly upsetting. Obviously, the entire world seeming to fall apart at that time, having to move cities was very upsetting, but the sense of maybe Glasgow Improvisers Orchestra falling apart because we couldn't meet physically was profoundly upsetting. And I'd tried it with another band, the Tenementals, which was just in the last 7 years. So we play pop songs, punk songs, rock songs that have a time and a pulse that we all need to be together. We even tried just trying to do Happy Birthday in time without latency, and it just didn't work. Whereas with improvisation, because inherently improvisation is so much about call and response or musical conversation, listening and responding, we were making quite beautiful sounds. We just were getting used to the dropouts, getting used to the idea that Zoom would be the conductor. Zoom would decide whose voice was loudest, who's quietest. What we also liked was that there was members of the orchestra who perhaps wouldn't have been able to come to all of the rehearsals due to their physical illnesses or due to their child caring or family caring responsibilities, or animals that we'd never bring into the CCA who started playing the theremin as well, just by nature of this kind of spill between like domestic and performance space, this what's called theatre of the home. Like, we got to be introduced to babies being born and presented to the screen proudly. We got to be with members of the orchestra who were shielding, and for example John Russell, who was aware, sorry, this is very sad, but he was terminally ill at the start of COVID, and he wouldn't even be able to go into the clubs when they started opening again to play. So we were able to listen to his stories, to capture his oral histories. We were able to have people who were starting to travel around again, like Thomas, who was going on a train through the Alps, or Raymond, who was in Tuscany, for example. They made this new way of making music, which was almost like the Walkman, that sense of listen and walk, or listen and roller skate, but the members of the orchestra could do a travel and play, walk and play. Whereas Maria Sappho, for example, would use this platform to play with trying on other identities using kind of scratch video approaches of layering her present body with her digital archived body with her family photographs body, and she almost became like a cuttlefish, like painting another self onto herself. And yeah, we had Yasuko Kaneko in Japan, and Yasui Yasuhiro using these, incorporating the outside as well, the outside world, organic forms with digital warping, fisheye lenses, with superimposition. And yeah, we just had people like Ian and Laura from Canada, Instant Places, who'd been making this kind of telematic art since the 90s. They would beam in this kind of digital wraparound, augmented painting of their art onto themselves. So I think it's popular with us because it afforded us another form of creativity that maybe even members of the orchestra like myself, I might not have been as confident with doing some of the more political things that I did on Zoom if I was in a physical theatre putting myself centre stage. Like we had a performance about colour. We'd come up with all these little prompts just kind of ad hoc based on what people were up to at that time. So we had this piece, why don't we do a piece based on colour and interpret it however you like. Normally if we were doing a graphic score, we would maybe speak to the engineer a few weeks in advance of the CCA, get the projector up and running. We'd have to feel like we'd invested in making a film for weeks on end before we presented it to people, whereas on Zoom someone could spontaneously come up with a concept colour and then people would be like drawing on paper to screen, or I was drawing on my own face with makeup. There's quite a few pieces based on masks and makeup and painting on the face that made some of us sort of realise how we needed that almost as an armour to perform, and that drawing attention to gender difference as a part of the performance art was maybe something that I would have been too shy to do before. So yeah, that's the reason. I think accessibility and throwing out some of the past rules. Cool.
Thanks, Jessica. So of course the use of AI that's on everyone's minds in creative work is here and now. You know, people are using it, it's out there. It's crazy what AI generative music can do, including create you a song that is release quality.
Yeah.
So what positive compliments, in your opinion, could it make to the way we work?
Well, we've been discussing this a lot actually in curriculum development with the team and with our new academic lead of digital design undergraduate programme. So you just met downstairs, Russell, who is an artist who has folded artificial intelligence into his practice. And in fact, some of the images I just showed you on screen there of Raymond McDonald and Maria Sappho, they've been doing this amazing project in Geneva in the AIIA, the Artificial Intelligence in Art ensemble. So for example, they've been working with an artificial intelligence being who they call Shimmer, who's essentially like a chat generated tool. So trying to just show you, so for example, in the book that Raymond McDonald published called Conversations with Shimmer, which was essentially printed accounts of maybe creative prompts that she's come up with or he's come up with, or philosophical questions that they've asked each other. One of the chapters was where Raymond was sharing, I really like Alexander Calder mobiles. I play saxophone normally, but I'd love the idea of a musical instrument that looked like an Alexander Calder mobile. And she just generated all of these almost Escher-like nonsense forms, but he took the designs, went into a welding studio and fashioned this instrument for himself.
Wow.
Which he just calls the object.
I like that.
Because it's like a percussive object. He can use brushes, he can tap it with hard objects, for example, but it's completely different to the virtuosity that he'd trained himself with saxophone for decades. So artificial intelligence in art can be really fascinating when maybe a group of, Raymond's a psychologist, Maria Sappho is a techno-feminist composer, artist. There's dancers, a dancer Mandeep from India, a performance artist Condi from South Africa, Jonathan and Natalie from France, Geneva as well, who have basically been nurturing this artificial intelligence being, and they've been exhibiting the results. For example, Maria made an opera with this artificial intelligence being.
Wow.
Asked her, you know, how shall I build the set today? And she said something like, oh, use a machine gun. So she took a plaster object to a firing range and built the set.
Wow.
So that was quite frightening, of course, but also quite radical and quite got Maria in a space that she never would have normally gone.
Yeah.
When it comes to sound design as well, I remember hearing this amazing talk in the School of Sound where Walter Murch was a few years in a row. So
Yeah.
it was Casey Collins who did a talk called AI Ate My Sound Design. Help, I think. AI Ate My Sound Design. And in that, Casey Collins showed a soundscape that she'd made, or that they'd made, and then one that this artificial intelligence, like text prompt sound design tool had made for the Quay Brothers animations, which are quite like creepy, occult looking horror animations. And the AI sound design was very convincing. Collins pointed out that perhaps there could be parts of the job that, if parts that were maybe more banal or time consuming, like the organization, the parsing, for example, of bad takes or noise and things like that. You know, a lot of the tools like broadband noise reduction use artificial intelligence to pick out the bad frequencies. But when it comes to our students' work at the moment, we've just been really keen to get students to be aware of, if they are working with artificial intelligence, just to, you know, there's certain projects that are designated projects where they are maybe given this sort of traffic light system of, say if it's a self-directed situated practice in year 4, they might want to make a project that is specifically telling the audience about how using text to image AI generation is like riddled with the biases of the data set that the machine learning model learnt from. They might be wanting to pull apart like the racial biases, the gender biases that the AI brain conjures. But as long as they're explaining it really in depth and accrediting all of the stuff that the AI did, then that is allowed, that is encouraged for some projects. Whereas if it's their creative reflection, we want them to write that themselves. We encourage them that, like, even if your own text isn't perfect, we'd much rather, you know, a few errors and things like that than this strangely perfect ChatGPT text. So we just try and make sure that there's really clear boundaries for the students, and that's really helped them, I think, so far. It helped us in marking too. Sometimes students might, for their situated practice, they want to make a score for a visual piece of work that in reality might require like a Marvel Studios level of visualization team to build. So rather they're making this kind of, as you like, a placeholder image set, and then they can focus on the sound that they're doing from the ground up. Other times students have used it so that they can build the musical score and the sound design and keep the original voice of Ripley and Aliens when they're wanting to redo the sound design and keep some of the original acting performance. But overall, like, I do sort of teach them about how, maybe the AI generation tools aren't quite as like magically skilled as they seem. Like, there was this exercise that we did in the Learning Teaching Conference all about the Gorbals vampire, which is this mythical kind of story based in Glasgow around a shady character essentially that is quite grim, that some people thought, oh, maybe it's a vampire. So we used Runway, Meshy, Firefly, Copilot, and Perplexity to try out, okay, what happens if you type Gorbals vampire? Oh, a lot of men come up, quite a few Twilight looking sparkly vampires, or Interview with a Vampire, kind of camp, gothic, effeminate looking vampires. Oh, not many women. I'll try typing woman vampire in the Gorbals. I'll try it with a vaporwave filter over it. And the image that I generated using that prompt, no other adjectives, it came up as a character, looked like one of the girls in Sin City, one of the femme fatales, lipstick, very sexualized, let's just say. I won't go into a lot of detail. No fangs, no markers that it was a vampire, very kind of nondescript background. So again, no real inkling that it was in the Gorbals in Glasgow. So yeah, I think there's a lot of amazing work that can be done, and of course there's the quite worrisome existential implications that can have in the industry kind of career spectrums. But overall, like, there's no point in just trying to shut it down or shut it out of the program. There's, as people say, the genie's out of the bottle now, which is we've just got to be super conscious of the harms. I don't know if you've heard recently in Glasgow, a train company, who I won't name, has replaced the voiceover telling you what the station is that you're coming up to with an AI voice.
No, I did not know of this news.
Yeah, it was just in the news a couple of weeks ago, just on BBC Scotland, I think. And
they have a reason for that?
Well, it was curious. And a lot of the responses people interviewed in the station was that, I find it really freaky. I feel bad for the original person who was hired to do the voiceover. And then within a few days, the person who had recorded voice and it was used as a AI trainer without her consent came forward and said, that's my voice.
Oh.
In the same way Scarlett Johansson's voice had been stolen essentially from her by another AI company. So whilst thinking about all of the possibilities with it and the tools that can really, enhance the creative process or make sound quality even better than it had been, we've got to just be aware of like all of the gender and racial inequalities within that, and the who are the losers when it comes to this, who misses out, who's being exploited, who's being misrepresented. Starting from here, we're in a classroom, one of our sound teaching classrooms. So usually, as you can see, this space is filled with a couple of large screens, a couple of very noisy, loud speakers.
I love the windows.
And the nice cityscape out there. So the reason that we've got all of the Mac computers in, we're just getting some new ones installed throughout the whole room as well, is so that when students are being taught digital audio workstations like Pro Tools or video editors like Adobe Premiere, they are seeing the process on screen, they are trying it in real time, they can do like scaffolded tasks in maybe small groups or almost as if they're working for a client in industry, because some of our team members they work with us part-time and they're still working in the industry. So these classrooms are like the equivalent of their painting studios in that they've got all of their softwares they need. But they also can function in quite a different way in that it is not always just the staff that are at the screens here. We really find it important to do what's called peer review, formative feedback sessions where students show their work in progress. Students play back maybe a film they've been making. So when students hand in their project, they're never really going in the dark about what are the ways to optimize that project. And yeah, those are usually the best days. I find it's the days where the students are showing their work and the other students are asking questions about it. And yeah, they use these like interactive learning technologies like Padlet, so that even when we're delivering a lecture and we have some of our knowledge we want to share, but the students are typing in real time or in advance responses to some of that content, and it's can be a lecture delivery in real time, or maybe they've got lecture videos so that they can speed up my voice or have subtitles, so that the contact time can be mostly about them discussing in small groups and not just having to watch and listen all the time. So sometimes those conversations, they can go on in spaces like the Glasgow School of Art library, where they're surrounded by all the books and the archive films and things like that we're learning about. They can find all their supportive assistive technology tools on a lot of the computers, but also even some more hands-on like color filters or pens that read aloud the text in the books.
Oh wow.
Which is nice. But yeah, maybe just to show you a bit of a taste of like some of the highlights of ways we learn in the studio. So say for a project called Sonic Worlds, Emotion in Sound and Experimental Film, we have a couple of like hands-on sessions where they discover how to make abstract films, perhaps using these kind of layering. This is called poem motion from Takahiro Kurashima. So sometimes these books are actually raw materials that can be filmed, or images that can be scanned and then animated in their video editor. Sometimes the books are obviously more like textbooks where they're learning about the building blocks of filmmaking, you know, what's come before, what all of their choices to do with lighting and makeup, or documentary versus experimental can help them have their work make sense. Versus, you know, sometimes it's these like primary sources, like learning about materialist or structuralist filmmakers direct from Michael Snow, Peter Goodall, like all of these original voices. Whereas sometimes if we're learning about, say, like Norman McLaren's style of like visualized music, we might play back some sounds, and they might play with either drawing directly onto film or having these like fast track animation cells that they can then scan into their computer and turn into an animation. But generally the kind of idea with that project is that the students are coming from product design, immersive systems, sound. They're being placed in a group where they are given a task of making an abstract film with abstract sound that maybe doesn't have faces, it doesn't have words, it doesn't have representational objects, but they are each tasked with eliciting an emotion from maybe an indigenous community. So say the emotion Awumbuk is from the Baining people of Papua New Guinea, which is a Pacific island. It's a very remote place. And Awumbuk is the feeling, this heaviness that they have after a visitor leaves. So I might have a Awumbuk after you leave, but it's, you know, it's a very geographically specific emotion, but it's maybe more helpful or more deep than, say, if a student said, you know, I feel sad this person has left, but maybe it's like a Awumbuk speaks about this heaviness after visitors leave. It's this like embodied, this like, this pulling sensation. It's more physical. It's even quite symbolic. The Baining people, they allegedly fill a bowl of water, leave it outside their door, have the Awumbuk all soaked up by this water, and then cast it out the next day.
Wow.
So students, they're tasked with making a film in a group about that and hopefully listing that. maybe using these optical kind of devices, you know, filming with their smartphones or a digital SLR, and essentially using colour, ink, pattern, and capturing it in a way that is, yeah, very different to what you see on TV a lot of the time. But you maybe could use it in like dream sequences or in like sensory therapy rooms and that kind of stuff, or in club environments. But that's just to give you a little bit of a taste of like, sometimes it's not all about sound and moving image coming from the screens, rather they're generating it from scratch. So yeah, this is a room that we normally would break up into tables and workstations for generating experimental film, or use the green screen if students were wanting to do science fiction or telematic music making. This is also the room that me and the staff do all the curriculum development in. So
got it. Thank you.
It's covered in all of those ideas. Here, so there's some people working away in this room, but we've got other computers that have like 3D modelling and medical visualization, human anatomy kind of classes go on in this room. So those are Windows PCs, and same in here. So yeah, these classrooms, like there isn't a specific classroom for a specific year group, but rather we've got studios that focus on the gaming and virtual reality interfaces, or the 3D modelling, or the sound and film. So this room is quite special for the other cohorts that I don't teach, but this is called the XR Lab, so extended reality, which consists of virtual reality headsets and computers, and yeah, just what you notice here is probably this wide open space. So if you're wearing an HP backpack with a virtual reality headset, you're free to like explore the virtual space without bumping into things. Very important. But yeah, this extended reality room is often like a portal to all of the diverse platforms that they make for, like, we've got the Director of Emerging Technology, Paul Chapman. He's doing a lot of research with like pharmaceutical engineering companies who make these virtual reconstructions of their labs, or do like simulations of trying to find the exact precise measurements of ways of activating different ingredients. And whereas maybe the students might generate experiences that maybe encourage empathy with marginalised, minoritized communities as well. A student made a cat cafe in virtual reality in first year as well, which was nice.
I like that.
Yeah, it was really good. And then we have these kind of breakout social spaces, like for board games, because actually serious games is an area that our students find really rewarding. You can make a board game that teaches people, like school kids, about equality, diversity, inclusion, or you can make a board game that teaches people about virus contagion. Serious games, it's that idea of like sneaking education or sneaking like social cohesion into a board gamified experience. We've got kitchens on every floor, which means that students can not break the bank when they come to study with us. They can bring their lunch from from home. So what I didn't show you, because there was some meetings going on, there was some hot desking spaces upstairs, so that our colleagues from the product design and innovation part of the school can come and sometimes work here, and likewise we do the same. It's over a building about 5 minutes up the road. But then we do have these studios. So this is our 5.1, one of the studios, which has 5.1.
I saw that.
And in that room we have, it's a voice recording booth.
Nice.
So it's nice that that's kind of permanently set up just for that kind of small scale focused work.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is making use of the space for sure. Because we have a bigger one next door that I'll just show you. That's actually 7.1.4 Dolby Atmos.
Nice.
With a Foley room attached as well, where students can bring in all of the vegetables that they thwack to try and simulate fight sequences.
Oh, okay. Very good. Who cleans up after?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it can be, I've seen the carpet like filled with watermelon seeds and stuff like that. But you know, they've been working hard when it's like that. So yeah, this room is equipped with obviously speakers, an extra 4 speakers in the ceiling, as well as the 7 and the 0.1, the subwoofer. So yeah, this room, you don't have to use Dolby Atmos in it, but students have used this, say, for their year 4 project, which is called Sound for Industry, Music and Sound Design for Film, where they take existing film clips that they choose, rip out everything, start from scratch, or keep the dialogue if they want to, if it's appropriate, and then they compose. Let's see if this does a little freeze for me. They compose the music from scratch, and this room is often used to gather the Foley, maybe even some of the ambiences as well they can get from around. So this is a scene from the Animatrix series, which had really challenging kind of shopping list of sounds to get. So
get out now.
But all of this music was composed using software synths, I think the Spitfire audio, if I remember right. So this is from James Johnston and Guy Pollan. Detail you hear of the metal scraping, for example. They used a lot of kitchen household objects, I think, for that.
Cool.
Another scene they did, Aliens, had, I think, a lot of the spaceship sounds were from James's kitchen, and monster sounds were kind of accentuated more than in the original film. Quite often the xenomorph was maybe more silent and stealthy, or a few squeaks, but James used, I don't know if you've heard of the Krotos dehumanizer before. This like convolution tool, essentially, if you roar into a microphone, you can choose and tailor what kind of monster you're going to turn your voice into by, rather than convolution reverberation using an impulse response of any building, rather it convolves the human voice with animal voices.
Got it.
So I think James used some of that, some of the old school kind of like a can opening slowly to get roaring and growling sounds. So this is without the music, but it lets you hear some of the Foley and sound design.
Got it.
That's a wee work in progress that's just on this computer right now, and the full finished clip is available on gsashowcase.net under Sound for Moving Image, and you can see James Johnson's profile there.
Excellent.
Cool. So this is the 7.1.4 Dolby Atmos room, which I like to think of as almost being like a nice bridging room between the 5.1, which is, you know, thought of as for cinematic, for TV, for broadcast. Dolby Atmos, again, of course, you know, used for cinema, but the great thing about it, you can mix once and package everywhere. So you could actually mix in 7.1.4, but bounce it down to binaural or stereo. And this is our ambisonic room as well. So again, this is transitions into more like ambisonics, often used for research or for acoustics. simulation, design with, you know, infrastructure, acoustic engineers. But our students primarily use it so if they're using an ambisonic microphone to capture a sound field that really exists out there in the world and then spit it back out over this spherical array of 16 speakers. So you can try and capture, reproduce an existing sound field, or our students often use this as a kind of spherical playground to plot mono and stereo sources. So they're synthesizing a sound field that doesn't exist in reality, almost using it like a sonic womb.
Nice.
But of course, sometimes you use it for mixing and trying out sounds that eventually will be spat out to binaural for virtual reality experiences or game experiences too. We've got these kind of breakout study spaces as well on the 3rd floor. A Zoom room for telematic music making or big meetings. So it's nice lighting and everything.
Yeah. And we
should have brought that upstairs. More archive space in there. And this is another sound teaching studio that has the new Macs as well. So
it's so neat and clean.
It is this time, yes, because the students are away for the summer. But yeah, the master's students will be working away in here as well over the summer. But it's quite cool. In these classrooms, you get floating licenses for Ableton, for Max 8, for and then everyone has access to Adobe Creative Suite, as well as Pro Tools, and I'm sure I've missed some. Final Cut on the Macs, on some of the Macs. They're a big shared open space for those critical studies classes that are shared with the rest of systems.
It's this
These are
huge
pretty
screen.
big for scale.
There you go.
We've got the big academic support staff office as well down here, where we have 4 members of academic support staff that help our students. So they've made quite a big site to draw attention to themselves. And then in every building on campus, I'm pretty sure we've got quiet rooms for our students to have if they need a moment of reflection or prayer and things like that. So we've got our quiet room here. The library up at the main campus has a lovely sensory room as well that has like LED lights and bean bags. And another kitchen. What else have we got? We've got a couple more rooms that are for the research team and Director of Emerging Technology. But I think that's about it on these floors, and for anyone curious about Glasgow School of Art, just know this is one of about 14 buildings I think we have. So they really recommend looking on the website for open days, for campus events, where you'll get to meet members of staff from all across the building. You'll get to see the Reed building, the Haldane, the library. One of the favourite buildings is the Student Association. So that's up on Scott Street. That's called the Vic, and that's like a multi-purpose performance art space.
Okay.
Where students can put on work and they get funding to do that. This is just a drop in the ocean of what GSA has.
That's right, the deep thinking ocean. The deep learning ocean.
Yes, I like to think so, yeah.
Thanks, Jessica
You're welcome.
Program leader of the Bachelor of Design, Sound for the Moving Image
That's the one.
program, for showing us around just one of many buildings
GSA.
of GSA. But this is an on-location special on Music and Chat.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone, and I'll see you next time.